enjoyed their summer break, and it went by very quickly, but we're back and we're beginning our new school year, so everything's new, so everything is great, and we'll move forward. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and with that being said, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Mr. Sudduth, and who's second? And Ms. Michelle Caldwell. And all in favor, please address by raising your right hand. All opposed? The motion was passed. At this time, Ms. Bush is out of town and will not be here today. Mr. Sailors is on his way to a meeting and will be here at 10:30. So I have asked Mr. Lewis if he would chair Ms. Bush's section of instruction.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Item 2.01 is the appearance of visitors, and I believe we have none. Is that
correct?
Correct. So item 2.02, the 2019 Summer Reading Camp Report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. McCoy and Dr. McDavid are going to share with you a summary of our summer reading camp experience for students, a little bit about the students that are in attendance at that camp, as well as the results from that camp. Now, this is not an in-depth presentation regarding the reading scores. As you may recall, as we get those test scores in, and we should have most of the test scores in and finalized and have comparison data for the state by October, and at that point we would schedule an opportunity either during the instructional portion of the Committee of the Whole or as a workshop following the Committee of the Whole to go through all the test scores in depth. So today is really about summarizing and sharing with you the results from the Read to Succeed summer camps. Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. As Dr. Royster said, we will share a little bit of the data with you as it pertains specifically to summer reading camp. We will, since it'll be a little bit of time between now and October, we will then review again this data in light of the reading data that comes back from the state once we have the official data. So you'll see this data again coming back up in October or November whenever we do that presentation for you on reading specifically. So Dr. McDavid is going to talk in depth about the reading camp, similar to last year as far as what we do experience-wise in the reading camp for our students. But just a couple of things to, again, to bring to your attention with the reading camps. It is a part of our legislation for Read to Succeed. And the whole point or the goal of the camp is really to help students develop and apply their reading skills and writing across the school day in all the academic disciplines. And so that carries over into summer for the students who need a little bit more remediation, who don't make quite the scores they need to in reading, to be able to give them a little bit more assistance and more intentional one-on-one time or small group time to help them fill those deficits in reading. So the purpose of the legislation, again, is to have evidence-based reading instruction in PK through 12. And again, we'll review that in October. Again, you are all familiar with the balanced literacy and disciplinary literacy framework of what we use for that. Again, to identify struggling readers early, and we would say that while the Read to Succeed legislation focuses on third grade, we really start identifying readers in kindergarten. Obviously, we want to start as early as possible. And to provide targeted, effective comprehension support. So not only just during the classroom in the school, but again, in summer, as you're going to hear in a minute from Dr. McDavid, some of the strategies that we use in the summer with the students to increase their reading levels. The communication with parents is outlined in the Read to Succeed legislation. We go a little bit above and beyond that with parents, and you're going to get to hear some of the activities we did this summer with parents, specifically in regards to reading. And as you all know, there is both pre-service and in-service training required by the state. Those 4 courses required for elementary and the 1 course required for high school or secondary teachers to help them in the instruction of reading in the classroom. Outside of that, of course, we do our own trainings with balanced literacy and disciplinary literacy on top of those trainings. I believe it's by 2020 or 2021, all teachers coming out of college in South Carolina will already have these courses. So that's where the in-service piece comes in. So once we get through that point in time, all colleges in South Carolina will have trained the teachers coming out in those reading strategies that many of our teachers are having to take right now. And then all students will develop reading and writing proficiency that prepares them to graduate, succeed. This is tied to the profile of the South Carolina graduate, which you all are familiar with. And then, obviously, all districts in South Carolina has to have a research-based reading plan, which we submit every year that the board chair and the superintendent signs off on. But again, that's the core of that is our balanced literacy and disciplinary literacy framework in there. So just some of the statistics, very similar to last year. And we had 331 who scored not met 1 in reading. And I'll remind you that that not met 1 category is the lowest category of the categories we have now for SC Ready. So that's a does not meet expectations, lowest category of does not meet expectations on there. So similar to last year, about 321 last year. 277 of those students were eligible for good cause exemptions. And you will recall that the good cause exemptions are several of those ones listed. There's more than that, but those are the ones most of the kids get as far as a good cause exemption, either because they're ELL, still learning the language, new to the country, or learning the language, haven't had the required years of experience yet. Special education exemptions with the 2 years of intervention, or that they've been retained prior in the past. That could be kindergarten. And as you all know, the practice in Greenville is we have always, for 10, 12 years, have really focused on, if we're going to retain students, doing it in the early grades where we have an impact on them. And then the portfolio review in May, and that's something my team does with the students. All teachers are required to keep reading portfolios for their students. That is in the event that a child scores below that required score. Sometimes students have bad test days and score below the score, and they can read. So that's where that portfolio piece comes in, that we have to review and take in all the evidence that's required by the state to look at to determine is that child reading on grade level or close to grade level. So we review portfolios in May, and then we review them again at the end of summer as well. And so there were 54 students expected to attend. Those are the ones that would get the stronger worded letters about they really need to attend the summer reading camp. Again, we have many more kids that attend that don't have to attend, but it would be good for them to attend. And 34 of the 177 cut score met the 177 cut score on math. That's the state-determined cut score. At the end of summer, all kids are tested that were into summer reading camps. And any kid that meets that 177 score or above is automatically promoted by state law. That's the cut score for reading for 3rd grade. And so then in June, we also reviewed, prior to summer reading camp, the 20 portfolios of students. So Dr. McDavid is going to talk a little bit about the actual content of the reading camp and some of the activities that we did this summer.
Thank you. The summer reading camp is a time that our teachers, students, parents come together and really share the love of reading. We're very pleased to present to you some of the activities and the results from this year's camp. To follow up with what Mr. McCoy said about what we do, just as a note, the summer reading camp is for 3rd grade students only. In prior years, we were able to invite 2nd graders, kindergartners, but now that the legislation is underway, we host the camp for 3rd graders only. But as a note, we know that we have been working since the students entered our system to ensure that they were on track to be reading by the end of 3rd grade. So one might ask, what happens before this camp happened? Well, students have various needs. They come to us from different developmental, cognitive, and even language backgrounds. And with those, it takes time for those to develop. 4K, we have 81 classes of 4-year-old kindergarten across Greenville County schools. Those classrooms serve students who we identify at the beginning may have some of those developmental, cognitive, or language delays. In grades K through 2, we use a formative assessment with FastBridge, and we use that data to inform instruction and support. In our core program, there are balanced literacy supports in every classroom, including those purchased by the district with libraries, word study kits, and ongoing training opportunities for teachers. We identify students in need of additional support with our data, our FastBridge data, and we also use our Fountains and Pinnell formative assessments to identify those students in need of support. So we don't wait until 3rd grade. As early as kindergarten, we know which students need intervention, and we have reading interventionists in place based on the need of the school, based on the number of students needing intervention. We also have the literacy specialists, partially funded by the state of South Carolina. We use leveled literacy intervention throughout the year with our intervention support in the schools. So when you see what we're using in the summer, it is a continuation of a model that is proved effective in the schools. And we have ongoing monitoring of literacy progress. From 4K all the way through the end of 5th grade, a parent will be able to know, a teacher would know on any day where the students are in terms of their reading level. That is something that is openly communicated, conversations are held so that expectations are clear. But then when we get to the 3rd grade, we begin by sending a letter home in September for all 3rd graders, just letting the parents know about the law and Read to Succeed in general. Again, it's not a surprise because they've seen their students' reading levels every year. In February, for those students who are behind, according to the levels identified by the state, a letter is sent to the parents, not saying your child's just behind, but please come in and let us have a parent conference. That parent conference is important because it's more helpful for us to partner with parents in reading, because the more we can share with parents, the more we have our students reading at home, the skills and deficits as well as the things they need to work on. That is all a part of the conference that they have with the parents. In March, after that conference is over, we send an initial letter asking the parents to sign up for Read to Succeed Summer Camp. Again, our first target are the students who are behind. We also let parents know in April, that's the deadline for a confirmation of summer reading camp. That is not our deadline, that is the state deadline. That is important because we have to get students registered in April for a camp that starts in June based on an assessment. Some have to come, and we don't get the results back until the end of May. So the deadline to return their confirmation is in April. In May, we send letters home after our team has reviewed the portfolios to let the parents know if their students qualified for a good cause exemption, and they have a 2-week window to appeal that decision. And then in late May, after SC Ready is administered, within a couple of weeks, the State Department sends us our data, which is a not met 1, that lowest category of reading, the students who did not meet the cut score. When we get those scores, we find out that many students actually met the cut, so that they are not in danger of retention from Read to Succeed. The schools reach out, and this is something we added over the past couple of years because in our timeline, it seems that we've called our parents in the fall. We've met with them in February. So we reach out to say, we have our scores back and wanted to let you know that this is where your child scored for all of those we had conferences with in February. It's a nice way to close the loop. Some parents decide, and we encourage them to attend summer reading camp. So some parents decide they will go for the benefit. Other parents may decide that they will not send their children if their children met the cut score on reading. But that timeline is important for communication, as you will see in just a moment. Our student selection process is one that we can try to be as inclusive as possible to meet students, even those that have exemptions. We reach out, of course, to those who are required to attend by the guidelines, and those who have good cause exemptions in special education, the English language learners, those who are already in intervention with RTI, we invite those as well, and we let them know, you have the good cause exemption, your child is an English language learner, but we encourage you to attend because we feel as though it would be beneficial. Our state funding reaches out for just those students. Our funding really is based on the number of students from last year who scored not met 1. But we're able to extend the opportunity and invite more students who benefit from the program based upon our desire to be most inclusive. So for the state criteria for 3rd grade students who don't have the good cause exemptions, we use their winter Fountas and Pinnell level, which is equal to 1 or more grade levels below expectation, and we use those SC Ready reading cut scores, those are below the cut score. Our camp dates are June 17th to July 18th, and our theme this year was lights, sound, and action. We chose that theme in preparing some of our fourth graders for the unit in science they will be assessed on at the end of fourth grade on light and sound. So they have activities that they were being pre-introduced to fourth grade content over the summer in an exciting and inviting way. So when they do encounter that in fourth grade science, they'll have knowledge and skills, again, that transfers across academic disciplines. So lights, sound, and action. We invited a total of 923 students. Of those 923, 638 actually attended summer reading camp. Again, for Mr. McCoy's data, not all of those were required to attend, and actually of that 638, only 47 were attending based on their SC Ready reading scores. Others were attending as a result of conversations with parents and the desire to help their students get to improve their reading skills. Our ratio, the state requires a 15-to-1. We target a 12-to-1 based on the model of Fountas and Pinnell and the desire to serve students. You will hear in our video shortly that we have a ratio of, in some classes, 9 to 10-to-1. That is, as you'll see shortly, based on the reading levels. We had 4 summer reading campsites, and I'll share those in just a moment. We had 16 days of summer reading camp with an average of 13.4 average daily attendance. Our students, some started, some were there when we finished, so there were a total of 391 that had both pre and post assessments, with 2 weeks in June, the 4th of July break, 2 weeks in July. We had almost 400 students with both pre and post tests. We work with operations, transportation to take the list of students who are registered to attend to figure out where we can best serve our students from all across the 800 square mile radius of Greenville County. The 4 schools identified here were designed to serve our students from across the district. Fountain Inn, Lake Forest, and Welcome serve the majority of the students. Heritage has a camp funded by the Cliffs. It is not a summer reading camp site. However, for the convenience of not having to bus students all the way into the center part of Greenville, we hosted a satellite site with just the students who were Heritage, Slater, and Gateway. Only 2 classes were held at Heritage, but that was convenient because we coordinated our times, our meals, our transportation, and that kept our students from having to ride the bus. So we had 4 sites of summer reading camp in 2019. We select those sites again based on where the students live. We also try to work around the operations changes and updates that are happening in each of our buildings. This is a chart we've shared before showing the Fountas and Pinnell leveled literacy intervention and the levels. When we do progress monitoring of our students, this shows the grade levels, the months of the school year, and highlighted in orange are the grade level, the levels of Fountas and Pinnell, or the instructional levels that students should achieve in the first month, second month, third month. You will see that in the 3rd, 4th, 5th month of school, by February, students should be primarily at level O. And so when we target students who are at L in February of 3rd grade, that means they are 1 grade level behind. So those are the students we target. Those students are already receiving intervention at sites, but we invite them to come to summer to get 4 additional weeks of instruction. We also note that some students advance to levels M, N, even some at O by the time summer camp began. However, we still serve them because they are still in that 3rd grade reading level band and should be by the beginning of 4th grade at level P or Q. We looked at our levels and we used those to make our class sizes, classes. When we found students who were at level D, E, F, we made those class sizes smaller because those students were not just 1 grade level below, they were 2 or 3 grade levels below. and working with a group of 3 to 4 at a time, which is what Fountas and Pinnell recommends. We only want 3 in a group if they're reading at level, again, they're in 3rd grade, but they're reading at a level D, which is a kindergarten, end of kindergarten level. So we did 3 groups of 3 instead of 4 groups, instead of 3 groups of 4. So that'll be the difference, and making sure that our teachers had the tools to help our students make as much progress as possible. Learning to read by the end of 3rd grade is a continuum. We look at basic literacy in pre-kindergarten through grade 2, where students are learning to decode and gain that knowledge of high-frequency words. Again, those students who are on the levels D, E, F, and the lower levels, that's what they're doing. They're decoding. They're not yet reading at that level of proficiency. That partially with their developmental levels, again, we included students who have IEPs, we included students who were English language learners, and we included students who had developmental or cognitive delays. So we knew to expect that there would be some additional support we needed to provide. Intermediate, that's where they're doing the literacy skills common, which is the generic comprehension, common word meaning, and basic fluency. That's where we primarily work in grades 3 through 5. As they advance to the secondary, our disciplinary literacy framework supports literacy skills and specialization across subject areas. So with our summer reading camp, 4 weeks, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. We provide transportation, breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. We use level literacy intervention as a continuation of what students received during the year, and we had an enrichment period built in so that students had other activities related to science, art, music, and even physical exercise. Our community partnership experiences, which were partially funded by the grant, which I'll hit here, the 21st Century Community Partnership Grant we were pleased to achieve this year. They gave us funds to support Live Well. It's a community organization. They trained our enrichment teachers on how to use those physical activities to support reading. We continue to work with the Children's Museum of the Upstate for our students to have those hands-on experiences around light and sound. The Children's Theater came into each of our sites and worked with our students on making reading come to life. Our students presented their own activities and drama and acted things out, and they really enjoyed those activities. The Roper Mountain Science Center is an ongoing partner, and our students were able to go and experience the hands-on as well as to have Roper Mountain come and do on-site support and fun. The grant allowed us to send home books with our students with a take-home library. They had books throughout the week, but then there was a curated set of leveled readers so that students had the books they were able to read. Similar to the way we did last year, all of our teachers received training. However, when we found the list of our teachers, the majority of them were those who returned from the prior year. They wanted to come back. They enjoyed the experience. So instead of a 2-day training, they had a refresher session for the all summer reading camp teachers. Our placement, we still use the 2018-19 classroom teacher benchmarks that were done in May, and we placed those students in the classes based on their Fountas and Pinnell level. Again, we were able to begin instruction on day 1. Teachers monitored progress every week and maintained portfolios. As we reviewed those at the end of the summer, we could see the writing samples, we could see the assessment data, and we learned a lot from the way students perform and were able to perform over the summer, in addition to the way they performed during the school year. We still kept our trained team of Greenville County Schools benchmarkers. Most of them were literacy specialists who are very, very fluent in doing the benchmarks to come in to the school, 10 or 12 of them at a time, and do the assessments at the end of the summer for the teachers so the teachers could continue instruction until the last day of summer reading camp. In LLI, we have direct instruction. That is where the teacher sits with, and you'll see in this picture, teachers sitting with the students 3 or 4 at one time in their reading. We have word study, which is independent. They're learning that vocabulary and decoding. Writing, students write about what they read, and they write about their experiences at Roper Mountain Science Center. They write about what they saw and experienced at the Children's Museum. So writing is very much a part of our summer reading camp. Independent reading, we had both the scholastic books, we had the curated books, and we had weekly take-home book bags. Our supports with our grant, not only do we have our teachers, we have teacher assistants. Read to Succeed requires that we have media specialists. We invited volunteers. Behavioral interventionists from our district were there from Mr. Owens' office, and we also included our nurses in our support. Level Literacy Intervention recommends that students throughout the school year have LLI 3 times a week or 12 sessions per month. Students typically grow 1 level every 3 months. So if they began at level K, they would be in level literacy intervention 3 times a week, and over the course of, we'll use month 2 is September, October, November. By the end of November, they should be moving to L. And with that, you know that they can grow within that construct of level K and then advance afterwards to level L, and that is with 3 sessions per week. In summer reading camp, we did 2 sessions per day, an AM and a PM. So over the 14 days, 2 days were field experiences. We had 28 sessions, and our goal was for students to, in 28 sessions, make progress within their existing level, which is to maintain, or to grow or gain, meet that next level benchmark. With an attendance rate of 83.75%, we saw 82% of our students grow. We saw a net gain of the students that we had, the 638 students and the 391 that had pre and post tests. There were a total of 313 levels gained, and I added that to be, if they went from a level L to a level M, that was 1. If they grew in the level L, they stayed in level L, and that was fine. That's growth, but we didn't count that as a gain. But over the course of the summer, the students had, if you added all 391 students together, they had a net gain of 313 Fountas and Pinnell levels. The students were able to engage with reading with their peers, with their teachers at a much deeper and higher level, and it was focused throughout the time. The awards day, we had our parents in twice this year. We had them in at the beginning for an orientation. That was some feedback that I received from our parent survey. A parent asked, can we please come in, because our kids are going to a different school that we've not attended in the past. Can we come in and have a day? So we did a hot dog / pizza supper, and we invited the parents in the Thursday before reading camp started and gave them an orientation, the newsletter, the contact information, and let the children meet their teachers. At the end, we had just as many parents to come in for the awards ceremony and to celebrate with their student, their attendance and their gains and their progress in reading. So we have had great parent participation as well as student participation. I have the video here that I want to share with you. This was posted on Facebook and had thousands of views from parents and wonderful comments. So I'm going to go here, and then we'll answer questions. Nancy, is this queued up, or do I need to go from here? Okay. Don't know whose Facebook is going to pop up on this computer.
And then you could get Facebook on the district website.
Maybe I need to paste it in the browser.
To access it.
Okay. Well, we can share it at a different time. Our communications department compiled the video for us, and it shows our teachers talking, our students reacting, and our administrators. And one of the things I noted from the video were the number of anchor charts in the back and how consistent they were. The teachers working with the students build these anchor charts about reading, and they had some amazing breakthroughs in terms of students making those connections. So with that, are there any questions? Mr. McCoy?
All right, thank y'all for that. I think the first board member with questions is Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. No, no.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everybody had a good summer. I have a couple of questions about the summer camp. When I was looking at the numbers that you gave,
Yes.
why is it that we only do 4 weeks of a summer camp?
Okay.
Is that enough?
The State Department of Education requires 96 instructional hours. And with our prior model, we were doing 5 and sometimes 6 weeks. We noted that by the end of summer, we had fewer students attending. So to do 96 instructional hours in 4 weeks from 8 until 3, that's excluding the time they have for lunch. We meet the state requirements of 96 instructional hours.
So all of the sites did from 8 to 3?
Yes, ma'am.
That answered another one of my questions. Okay. I'm looking at that first slide where you said 638 students attended.
Yes.
But only 47 had the SE Ready, was based on the SE Ready reading scores. So we really are, it's only 47 out of how many?
If you go back to Mr. McCoy's presentation of the number of students who, with the 331, those students, according to Read to Succeed, that's who you would target. You would strongly target those who scored not met 1 in reading on that assessment. We didn't have that score until May. So
Yeah, that magic number, that 277, I'm
Yes.
looking at that 277. Which
So-
is the rest of them.
Yes. So of the 277, of the 331, 277 had good cause exemptions. These were students who, even prior to taking the assessments, the portfolios were built. The students who were recently coming to the United States and had not yet acquired the language, and they had been here less than 2 years, and we were working to build language acquisition skills. Those students with disabilities who were receiving special education services over 2 years. Some of the students with disabilities, of course, passed and met the cut. Some did not, but those developmental delays or those cognitive delays would have contributed to that. So the State Department says if they have that case, then they're not required to attend. And the prior retention, some students are retained in kindergarten or first grade. If they have been retained in kindergarten or first grade and have been receiving 2 years of intervention, even if they did not meet the cut score, they were not, they had a good cause exemption for not attending and would not.
Okay, I know the
retained.
state says that, but what does the district say? Because those 277, do we do anything for those 277, even though the state say they
Those-
have a good cause?
Yes, those 277, among those were students who were already invited to attend as optional. So we reached out to those students. We reached out to, again, over 900 students to say, although you may have a good cause exemption, you would still be a good candidate for summer reading camp.
Did any of them take you up on it?
Yes, yes.
Do you know that number?
I do not have that number.
We can pull it, we can
Karen
pull it out.
Andrews
for you.
has it.
Dr. Andrews would have the exact number of the 277 who attended and didn't have to attend.
Okay, because that was my magic number when I was looking at that, the 277.
We would like them all, just to your point, I think, Ms. Caldwell, we would
Yeah.
like all the 277 to attend.
Right,
Um,
right, and you have that 638 students attended. Did they attend the whole 4 weeks? Because I'm looking at your numbers. You had 83.75% attendance rate, but you only had 391 that finished. So my numbers might be off, but that is not 83.75 if I'm looking at it correctly.
So for the students who attended, We also offered Bell Excel summer camp this summer for our Title I schools. We did that through the Direct Student Services Grant. So that started 1 week prior to summer reading camp. We had a number of students who were not required to attend summer reading camp who decided to take advantage of Bell Excel. For example, Sue Cleveland, there were 60+ students who went to Bell Excel. Once that ended at the end of July, after the 4th of July, we had some new students to show up.
Okay, so,
And so they enrolled. They are considered to be enrolled after they show up.
so I know you're giving a presentation on the summer reading camp, and I know about Bell, but some of the others might not. So is it any way that we can get a presentation or something sent to them explaining what Bell is? Because I know you have a couple of different things going on, and I'm just focusing in on those, the ones that didn't attend this, if they attended something else. Also, what is the follow-up? I know you review the portfolios in the summer, but what about during the school year? Do y'all communicate with the teachers as to what these kids did during the summer, and how does that portfolio follow the kids?
Yes, the portfolios have already been sent. Mrs. Sherry sent those back to the schools. Each school portfolio was sent back, so the schools have access to that. They also have an electronic copy of what we pulled, including their map data. Their map data also translates back into our enriched GC source RAS system so that they can see the students' additional map scores. But yes, that conversation goes back along with notes in the portfolio for those that were reviewed, that we will continue that support and service, and it shows the parents, the teachers, what we did with the students.
Okay. Are the required students that don't attend the summer camps, are they retained? What happens with them?
So we had very few this year that didn't attend, that were technically required. It's not, the language doesn't use require because it can't
Right.
technically make a kid go. But what we do is if they say that's not attending summer reading camp, then we do review their portfolios at that point in time. So
Do you have that number? I know you said it's very few.
It was, I think of was it, how many was it, George, do you remember?
We reviewed
20? That we reviewed at the end of
There
summer.
there were only 7 who did not attend.
Yes, the 20 were just in review because of kids that may have not passed the map cut score, and so we had to review those portfolios. But the seven did not attend under that required or expectation that we also reviewed their portfolios.
Okay, with this, you're not only looking at the testing, right?
Correct.
You're looking at what they do during the year, because I know a lot of kids have test anxiety.
Correct.
But the number of the not met one
Yes.
looks like it's going the wrong way. Are we doing something wrong? You had 321 last year, but you have 331 this year.
Yeah, in the grand scheme, statistically, we would not be concerned about, those numbers are going to fluctuate a little bit around that 3. Obviously, we want them to go down every year.
Right.
But those are going to fluctuate a little bit based on populations of classes and all that kind of stuff. So statistically, the 10 would not be statistically significant in this case.
And out of over 6,000 students,
Right.
that's less than 0.5%.
Okay.
But we still want that number to
Yeah.
go.
To go,
That's what I'm
that
saying.
number.
Okay.
And I do
All
think,
right.
Ms. Caldwell, you'll see that with everything we're putting in place. I do believe you'll see that over time, once these kids start moving up, through the early grade levels with getting more detailed literacy instruction. I think you'll see those numbers dropping. But the 0.5%, as Dr. McDavid said, the 0.5% really is, actually it's a little bit below the state when you take the districts and across the state. But we want to see that obviously go down to nothing.
Right.
Ideally.
Right. Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin-Carlisle. I believe the video is ready, so we'll go back to the presentation, watch the video, and then return to questions with Mr. Shamley on deck.
Well, I don't think we are going to watch the video. It's still not working there. I think you'll have to watch the video on your own. I apologize for that.
That was
It's still not. Yeah, it's still not.
It's on the website.
It is.
The
If you
link
click
is
on
in
the link
your-
in the presentation. Yeah.
All right, then we will go back to questions. Nancy, we have about 10 minutes left. Is that all right? So without objection, we'll extend for another 30 minutes. Mr. Shamley.
Yes, just a question. I'm sorry. Just a question. We have a number of students who are technically or otherwise considered homeless due to any number of factors. And the question I have is, do we have a process, or is it a challenge, or do we have problems contacting those students' parents? I mean, I'm guessing that very few of them have computers and
Right.
Email addresses and all of that. How do we go about making sure that we contact them, if it's even possible always?
Yeah, so I think the communication plan that Dr. McDavid outlined, to your point, can be a challenge sometimes. When you're contacting parents in February, a lot of times when we're doing the follow-up communication in April or May, a lot of times those phone numbers, those addresses are no longer valid. And so we rely heavily, we do a lot of communication at this level for the schools to help out the schools. But then when it comes to those cases of really tracking down, that's really where we rely on the schools, because they know their kids, more than, much better than we do, obviously, at this level. And so that would be there, trying to get the parents in, during those parent conferences that was so critical that Dr. McDavid talked about. Getting that face-to-face time with those parents. And I wouldn't even say Mr. Shamley is not even necessarily homeless. Some of those kids that just move regularly, we challenge a little bit with.
Yeah, and I understand. And I guess maybe the follow-up question is just rough. Do we pretty much make contact, or are we able to make contact with all of those parents?
Yes.
And then maybe sort of a subjective question is do we find that they're relatively responsive and concerned and supportive, or does it vary, a lot from parent to parent?
I think it's going to vary from parent to parent.
Sure.
I would say the ones that attended the summer reading camp this year were very, as you could see from the video, if you saw the video, were very excited to be there and very supportive of their students. I would say the majority of our parents fall more into that category than not. And then we try to supplement and help the students that, emphasize to the parents as much as possible how critical it is, how reading sets the stage for life, and how critical it is to be there for success.
Thank you, Mr. Chambly. Dr. Bala O'Connor.
Thank you. Excellent information. It sounds like a wonderful program again, and appreciate the presentation. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell asked some of my questions, but to return to some of the numbers participating, you said that those invited were one grade level behind, right? Why would we not also invite those that were any level behind, given your ability to discern so well all those different levels in the course of the year and the expectation that you could do move up in those levels pretty quickly and pretty well if everything was going as scheduled? So I would like to imagine that you wouldn't have to have fallen behind by 1 year to be invited to this, but anybody who's not on grade level, period, should be invited.
So we target those students who are one grade level below. A lot of that also based on, and we are able to do some tiering at some point with the students. We invite the level 1 and below for third grade just based on capacity and the part of that funding, but also a lot of that is teachers. We do struggle a little bit with the teachers, getting teachers to come in. We have a good base return from last year. One of the reasons we moved it from 6 weeks to 4 weeks is we were having a hard time getting teachers to come and work during the summer, of teachers you want, of teachers who are really good working with the kids that are at this level of work. So a lot of that, the 600, really, as Charlotte said, we invited 900, which is a significant number of students to run a summer camp in. And so a lot of that just has to do with our capacity in the summertime.
And if all those had shown up, we would not have had enough teachers
We would not have had
or
teachers.
anything to really run the camp. We knew
Well-
we'd have some not to come.
Correct.
And I understand that, you invited 900 and 600 and some came. And I understand that what you're saying to me, but I would like for the administration to consider that even if we have to pay above what the state requires to get students who we already know are reading below grade level in third grade to be able to get additional supplemental help. And in addition to that, I don't know why we wouldn't require those who we say do not have the basic English language foundation moving in. Why would they not be in the required to attend group when we know that just by hanging out over the summer and they cannot really manage the English language yet by moving here? It shouldn't, it seems to me, be optional, even though I understand nobody is actually required, but they ought to be in that camp of being considered.
And we certainly do strongly, I mean, we don't say required, obviously, because if we're challenged on that, we can't, there's nothing to hold us to them actually being required to attend summer camp. But those students that would be in those good cause exemptions, which would be the kids you're talking about, again, we strongly encourage them to attend the summer reading camp and tell them the benefits of attending that reading camp. We don't require.
They don't get the same communication as those that you believe would fail otherwise.
I don't know if the same letter goes out.
It is a different level if we are aware in advance that they have a good cause exemption.
Okay, and I guess I'm saying,
yes.
Please consider that, to me, if we know that they're going to show up next year, not really with a foundation of speaking English, they ought to be encouraged just as strongly as the other group so that they will not fall behind so far when they arrive in fourth grade.
That is a good idea.
That would be my suggestion on that. Also, when you said the DEF group are 2 or 3 grade levels below, I'm assuming that we're getting better at figuring out before they get to third grade that they're 2 or 3 grade levels below, which seems impossible if they're only in the third grade, that they could be 3 grade levels below.
Well,
but
if you've got some again, keep in mind the kids that were invited, some of the kids that did attend this were under good cause exemption, to your point, didn't have to attend. If they had some severe disabilities cognitively, it's not out of the question for a third grader to be reading on a kindergarten level if they're in special education.
Okay, so that would not include those with
No, that included everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you have to also bear in mind, although we're focused at this point on a presentation about summer reading camps, that's not the only intervention that occurs with students that are behind. There are multiple interventions that begin from the time they enter school until and beyond the time of summer reading camp, including intervention specialists at the early elementary grade levels.
Right, and I certainly am aware of that. I just think that when we're getting to third grade and so many of them are still not reading on grade level, this is our last pass with that group. So it becomes pretty, and the fact that we used to invite second graders is another thing I would say, is if we could manage additional resources and teachers to get those second graders into that summer camp seems like, just because the state isn't requiring, if that's part of what we need to do to change our reading foundation, I would not want us to discount looking at that.
And we'll certainly look at that, Dr. Balcon. I think the one year kind of we learned our lesson a little bit with that with second, because ultimately we'd love to serve multiple grade levels there. I think we kind of know now how many kids we invite versus how many come. I think that first year we were unprepared for the number of kids that actually did come, and so instead of our class sizes then being 15 to 1, we couldn't find the teachers to teach in summer camp, and so those class sizes bloomed much higher. And so then we felt like we were watering down instruction for everybody, for the kids that were at this level. And so
maybe we need to pay them a little more to get them to come back in the summer, if that's what is required, or reach out a little further. I don't know, but it seems like we should be able to get teachers to come in for 4 weeks if we did that approach right. It's just, I understand that you all are doing lots of great things. It's just that for the children who aren't reading on grade level before or by third grade, we know that we're going to be paying so much more for their instruction to play catch up from then on. So the larger investment here seems appropriate to do. Last question I have is the 177. How strong is that score if the state says as long as they've met the 177? Where does that really put them? Is that like very tip end of MET?
Yes, they've done a statistical study, and I was looking around for Dr. McCreary, but they did an extensive study with the correlation or indication of where not MET 1 meets MAP. And so not MET 1, what we're designing is another way of showing that students scored above that not MET 1 cut. So in the study, they did it, and within a confidence band, they said that 177, if they scored there, that means they scored above. There's another indicator showing that they are reading above the not MET 1 level. So that 177 set by the state is based on the study of thousands of students across South Carolina to correlate MAP scores and not MET 1, and the 177 is their design.
And after not MET 1, is that just MET?
Not MET 1 is the lowest 5% of students in the state.
So they're still, though, not meeting.
They're still not meeting, yes, ma'am.
So then why would we allow 177 to work for us if they're still not meeting grade level?
In South Carolina, they say that when you score not met, that you are still within the range of third grade performance. You've just not mastered all of third grade standards.
Well, if we're saying the lowest 5% of not met,
Is not MET 1.
then you've got 95% who are still not meeting grade level standards. I'd like to know what that number is and how far we are from being able to serve all of those who are not met
Okay.
in South, on that test, if I could.
I don't believe we're saying 95% are not meeting, the bottom
No.
5% of the total.
Right, right. Of the total. So
Of
what?
all students.
Okay, so what would the number be then who are still not scoring, would be scoring not met? Not just the
Are you asking
lowest
the percentage
5%?
of students that would fall in that interval? And I don't
The
have that
number of
right now.
students.
I'm sure we can send that to you.
Yeah.
But I
We've not
think,
published
to
yet.
make sure I understood correctly, to make sure I'm not furthering some bad information, the state statistically set that cutoff saying that although you are in not met, you are within statistically an acceptable range of reading performance.
Yes.
And I guess yes, I understood that, and I guess I would just say that that may not need to be our standard, just because,
And I think
We're
that's
not-
why we have, well, what's the total number we had in the reading camps?
Total was 638, I think it
Right,
was.
and I think, I think that number reflects the fact that we're not drawing a hard line at the, what was it, 177?
Right, and the 177 actually, at the end of summer reading camp, Dr. Ball-Connor, we have to actually send a letter if they make that saying they are promoted. That's in law. If they meet those cut scores, we are required to.
But my
promote
point
them.
is, there's a fairly significant number between 177
Yes.
and
Oh,
638 that we're serving that don't fall in that lowest
Oh,
category
correct.
that the state says must be served.
Correct.
We're serving a fairly large number
The
that
majority
they're
of
not being
families.
compelled to serve in this one program, and not including, to Ms. Goodwin-Cowell's point earlier, any other reading support opportunities that we have during the summer.
that's all. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball-O'Connor. Mr. Meek from Wright Field.
I'm just really glad some of you understand this. Bottom line is, how many students were retained in grade 3?
So of grade 3 retained outside of summer reading camp, there were, if I remember correctly, I've got that on my computer, we've got 25 that were retained in third grade prior to summer reading camp.
Prior to summer, after summer,
There was no kids retained after the summer reading camp.
okay. I think that's good. The 4 centers that you had, how many students were in each center of the 638 that attended?
Yes, they were 150, closer to 200 for each, and I'll get the exact numbers for you. But they each had high numbers, and the principals gave up a wing or 2 wings of their building to accommodate the number of classrooms. And that's always a challenge too with those numbers in the summertime. but I'll get you the exact numbers for each site.
What do you mean gave up their wings?
We coordinate to have the students in for the 4 weeks. Well, Fountain Inn, for example, the principal had lots of things going on, and having students occupy actually 2 wings of the building to get the number of classrooms needed. If we had 10 to 12 classrooms, the custodians can't get in that time. They can't go and clean those rooms until after our students leave. That's another reason the shortened camp helps, because they can go in and facilitate getting the rooms clean in time for school to come back. We have administrators on duty.
Maybe they should be reminded of what they're there for.
They are. It's
Okay.
it's coordinating the custodial staff, and we had a couple. One in particular that had a new custodian and a lead person, and they were wondering about that. And operations, Mr. Davey contacted, said they would have as much support as they needed to get the buildings ready for school. But for principals who have it all coordinated, it's just a little feeling sometimes
I'm
about
sure it's a
having
little
the building
challenging.
occupied.
Out of the 638 students that did attend, did you have a breakdown of how many of those students were in Title I schools?
I can get that.
We can break it down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Mr. Sudduth.
We are talking about third grade students only.
Correct.
We've come to our third slide from the beginning, purpose of the legislation. When I look at this, we got pre-service and in-service training for teachers. What grade level are those teachers?
So all teachers in grades K through 12 are required to take additional courses in reading instruction.
So we've got teachers in K through 12
Yes.
that are have in-service for this?
Yeah, so Dr. McDavid talked about the in-service she does specifically for the teachers for summer reading camp, but all teachers in grades let's say K through 5 teachers are required to take 4 graduate level courses in reading instruction. Secondary teachers and administrators and a bunch of other folks are required to take 1 course in reading instruction.
1 course per year?
It's over, elementary has 5 years to take 2 courses, and then they'll have another 5 years to take the additional 2 courses. And then secondary has 5 years. They have to take that course within 5 years after they recertify.
What is that course teaching them?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What is that course teaching them?
So the course teaches everything from basic literacy, and secondary is going to focus more on disciplinary literacy. The elementary courses are going to focus on the first 2 really are focused on basic reading instruction, so the strategies that are going to help students, a lot of struggling readers, read. So it's more for teachers and strategies to teach those students.
How well do we track high school students in reading? If I want to know anything about high school in reading, how would I go about doing that? What do we do to focus on that or to understand what that is?
So as far as like a test score would go, the only test scores you would have in high school would be like the reading portions or writing portions of ACT, SAT. You'd have your English 1 EOC on that as far as like standardized tests go. But unlike elementary, we don't have any tests like Fontes and Bunnell that would assess a student's reading.
So I am depending upon either ACT or SAT if I want to look at reading for high school students?
If you're looking at a specific score for high school students.
Not really a specific score. I'm just trying to understand how many people we may have, and I don't need a number really, but I'm just trying to understand. I understand the problem at the elementary school level, but when you get up to the middle school, then I don't see that much on reading, and when you get to the high school level,
So,
I don't see anything at all hardly.
well,
But I'm glad you're saying to me that we have got, all high school teachers have to take a
Yes.
course in reading.
correct,
I don't care what teacher you are.
correct.
Okay. So if we've got that, what do we do from kindergarten to the second grade, which is the first slide on that?
So those things that Dr. McDavid talked about specifically, we're focused in kindergarten for second grade, really focused on the kids learning to read, versus after that, we're really focused third and above, or to focus on that reading to learn. So that comprehension piece comes in heavily after third grade. So K1 and 2 is built on the basics, so the core instruction being balanced literacy, and then students who may struggle outside of that in the balanced literacy do a lot of these things you see listed up here. So we've got reading interventionists that work with kids. We've got reading coaches in schools that work with teachers to help them with strategies for kids that might be struggling. The level literacy, LLI, is what they use as the intervention program for those most severe kids that may be outside the reading band for their grade level. And then outside, just the normal supports we provide to teachers in the classroom to intervene with kids outside of the core instruction.
Would you say, Jeff, that our focus on our emphasis on reading is in the third grade? And then I'm trying to understand, if we have all this going on for the third grade, but yet we've got middle school and high school to go, I'm trying to understand, what is the focus on those levels?
On the middle and high school?
Yeah.
So the middle high school is going to focus heavy on comprehension. So we've got, you may remember from Mr. Reimer and Ms. Hogan's presentation, I think last year on Read 180. We are identifying those kids in high school who may truly have some reading deficits and who may be multiple grade levels behind for whatever reason. We have kids move in from this country all the time that are 6th grade levels behind because they've never been in school, or they've been in school till second grade. So we have programs in place to work with those students. For the for those in-services that you were asking for, the teachers at the high school and middle school level are getting instruction on how to teach literacy, basically comprehension, through their subject matter. So how to read and comprehend like a scientist or a mathematician or a social studies, whatever it is, world history student. So they're focused heavily more on the comprehension aspect, because most of the students in middle and high school, without exceptions, can read. They just struggle with the comprehension piece in some cases. So we focus heavily on the comprehension in middle and high school.
How big a problem is that, Jeff? I understand about reading, how fast I can read. It seems to be, what we look at when we get to the third grade and so forth. But when you get up into high school, it's not how fast can I read.
Right.
It's what can I understand what I've read. And that's where I see the real problem with our high school students, because they can read something off very fast. Right. But when you ask them, what have you read? They'll tell you, I don't understand, or I don't really know. This is what I do know. Anyway, on this one right here, what are level literacy intervention?
So that's the program that we use when a kid is struggling in core instruction in a classroom. That kid would go out with a reading interventionist, and that's the program we use that's taught to Fontes of Pinnell to intervene with that child.
And we find that at?
That's going to be, technically that's going to be, you could find that in all grades K through 5, heavily in K through 3.
So when we go to the next one, monitoring of literacy progress, then we're doing that K through 5?
Yes, that is through some of those assessments that we talked about up there. That formative assessment, that fast bridge assessment that we do several times a year, that's part of our progress monitoring. And then the teachers, Fontes and Pinnell, the assessments that they're doing with the kids in the classroom, they're constantly progress monitoring the kids through Fontes and Pinnell. Formally 3 times a year, but.
K through second grade, there's not any specific indicator that we're looking at like we get in the third grade.
No,
In other words, this summer reading camp, just what I'm asking.
Yeah. So all those 2 assessments up there would be the indicators we look at, really K through. Fast Bridge would be K through 2, heavy, looking at those assessments. Fontes and Pinnell would be K through 5. So yeah, we have very solid reading data on all the students K through 5.
Okay. It would be nice to know, or I guess interesting to know, how much progress is being made outside of the third grade, and this gives us an indication, I think.
Yes, sir. And that is part of our reading presentation we do for you each year. We always give you the Fast Bridge and Fontes and Pinnell data, so you'll get to see that when we do that presentation in October or November.
We fast forward ahead. I was looking at the instructional activities and supports, which I don't know is just lists instructional activities and supports.
Yes, sir.
Go on up a little bit more.
Trying to figure out which slide that's on. Is it further down? Okay, it must be down, Mr. Mercedes. This one here. Is that one there?
We've got right here on these activities right here, of course, every time I look and I see writing, when you're talking about all these activities, is this focused on print or on cursive?
So the writing is going to be both, depending upon which grade level we're talking about. So in the early grades, certainly cursive writing is still part of our standards and instruction.
Repeat that for me, Jeff.
So we still have standards on cursive writing. And so in our earlier grades, that writing instruction is going to focus on, I won't say focus on, that writing instruction is going to include cursive writing.
And that cursive writing carries how far in school?
Well, it carries as far as the kids want to use it, ultimately. Once you get up into the upper grades, we don't require students to say you have to write in cursive writing. I mean, once they really pass middle school, the majority of the work that they're doing is on the computer, is typing and printing. So past that, it would be up to the students as far as where they want to do cursive outside the grade levels that have standards for cursive writing.
Yeah, as I look at high schools over the years, very few of them write in cursive.
Yes, sir.
But a bunch of them print.
Yes, sir.
And I'm always wondering why we don't focus more on cursive. But
Well,
I guess part of that can be, Jeff, because of the computer.
yeah, or preference. I don't ever write in cursive myself, so I'm always print or typing.
I always write in cursive. Myself.
Right, it's a preference, for sure.
Okay, one last thing. That I was looking at here, and that is when we're talking about the particular activities, I may have asked this before. I understand the emphasis and the focus on the third grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we can say, well, no, we focus on every grade. But I really want to know where the focus is when you get past the third grade. I look at people that are in high school and you say, they're 3 grade levels behind as far as reading goes. And I'm saying, if they're that far behind, how in the world could they keep up? But when you say they're behind, then you're not talking about so much in being able to read, but able to comprehend.
Right.
Okay. I wonder how, well, I would like to know how much problem we have with comprehending in high school, but I don't guess there's a way that we can look at that.
It's difficult to tell specifically outside of the school, again, the tests that we give in high school, and our students perform, well on those tests, obviously. Certainly, some of the students may struggle, and we are catching some of those students through Read 180 and some of those intervention programs that we do at the high school. Now, a lot of it, again, is not necessarily, the majority of it is not outside of what we're doing within Read 180. The majority of that is not that they can't read the words on the page. It falls more into they're struggling with comprehension. So we work more on the comprehension strategies, which, to your point, we want every teacher to do that. It doesn't matter if you're a music teacher, art teacher, or science teacher. Every teacher needs to know those strategies on how to help kids understand their content and comprehend it.
Where do we put vocabulary in that?
So vocabulary is going to be woven. That's a big part of the reading instruction. In high school, that's going to be very content specific. So that's going to be every subject: science, world history, trigonometry. Those are all going to be very vocabulary specific instruction in each of those classes.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, but I'm not going to focus on that. Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate the information. That's all I have. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Studdard. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to go fast. The Read to Succeed program legislation's been in.
I think it's 3 years.
I was lost
I think
track.
it's 3 years.
Okay, so we started, I think in that same year, independent of Read to Succeed, or maybe was it the previous year, we started our own summer reading
I
camp.
think that was previous, yeah.
Yeah, because we started that conversation about the summer slide.
Correct.
And so we weren't really just targeting specific, the specific criteria. So I think to follow along with what Dr. O'Connor was saying, from a school district standpoint, I'd like for us to have our metrics that really will meet the metrics of what the state wants, but in terms of what we want out of our program, I'd like for us to have our own goals and metrics that we use. And if we feel we need to expand the program, I'm not interested just in meeting the regulatory restriction that the state's looking at. So I think we had more kind of aspirational goals for what our program, what we wanted it to be, and how we wanted to combat the summer slide. And so maybe that's something that we're doing with these other programs like Bell and that kind of thing. But to kind of understand what that looks like, what you guys would see that looking like, what is the intent of our summer enrichment programs, and then having metrics, and for us to understand that, I think would be a great conversation or great piece of information for you to be able to provide to us. To help us have that conversation from a budgeting standpoint about how much are we investing in the summer in helping students achieve and move ahead. What does that look like? So along with that, we said we retained 0 for 3rd grade.
Because specifically of the summer reading camp.
There were 3rd grade retentions.
Okay, that's what I was going to add. So what are the number of, how many students did we retain in 3rd grade this year?
So 3rd grade retention, if I remember correctly, I have to look at my sheet on my computer. I believe it's 25 3rd grade retentions.
Okay. So have you been able to do, we've got 3 years now, what is the trend comparison to how many students we were previously retaining and how many students we're retaining now?
So this year, just looking across grade levels.
Well, let's talk specifically about 3rd grade, because
Okay.
that's what this legislation created, this laser focus on 3rd grade.
3rd grade, if I can give you the exact numbers, but if I remember correctly, just looking at all of it yesterday, if I remember correctly, the 3rd grade has hovered around 20, 30, 40 kids, respectively, each year. There's not been it's hovered around that gap of 20 to 40 kids.
And that was before the legislation
yes.
and since the legislation. So the
Yes.
legislation had not had a driving impact on improving our metrics and or changing our outcomes.
Because that's not where we want to retain students.
Right.
That's contrary to what we know about retention having a positive effect. In our retention, we want it to be kindergarten, grade 1. We don't want it to be 3rd grade, because when the further you move up the grades, then you begin to pack on more and more negative connotation for the student and their future success. So we really don't want to be retaining folks into 3rd grade. We want to retain them kindergarten, where it has the minimal negative impact and the optimum positive impact, if there is a positive impact to be gained.
And those, to that point, those in kindergarten, 1st grade, our retentions have increased in kindergarten, 1st grade each year. Okay. So we are, and again, that would go back to the instruction that we're giving our schools, is if you have any question, that's going to benefit retain in kindergarten, 1st grade, where we can intervene easier with them.
Well, and I guess my only concern with that is there's sort of I'll use the word social justice issue in saying that if we get kids in kindergarten that haven't had the background they need in home, they're not ready, they haven't gotten 4K or they aren't ready, then being aggressive in penalizing them in kindergarten and 1st grade before we've really spent a lot of time working, having a year or 2 to work with them, seems like it could kind of create a disparate impact on kids that are already at risk. So I would be interested in seeing a little bit of analysis on our retention rates, and like by school comparison or by the using the poverty index or whatever, some comparison on that. Because I understand what you're saying. If they're not ready, they're not ready.
Correct.
But on the other hand, we've also said we're not going to do summer. Our priority isn't summer enrichment until 3rd grade with reading, yet we know if they come in K-5, we need them to perform.
A lot of that A lot of that, and Dr. Andrews would say this, I think, if she was here, a lot of that in kindergarten is the developmental pieces. They just simply were not ready for kindergarten. So moving them on to first grade is really not going to be advantageous for that child. And the research wouldn't bear that out either, that it's more, the earlier you can retain and intervene with a child is going to have less impact on that child than the further you wait up in the upper grades.
From an academic standpoint, I agree with you, that makes sense. But you layer in all the other pieces, which why we say if a kid gets retained, if they've been retained twice by ninth grade, the likelihood they're going to make it is
Correct.
nil. So it's just something I think bears a little more consideration to consider our retention policies in kindergarten and first grade, because if a kid hasn't had, if their parents haven't been reading to them and they haven't gotten all that instruction, that enrichment when they're K to 4, that doesn't mean they can't, they're elastic, that it doesn't mean that you can't feed it to them and they can't grow exponentially. But I don't think they can do that in kindergarten with 26 kids in the class. I think, and I know we do things during the school year, but again, it's just back to if they need more time, then let's give them some summertime. Instead of saying we're going to give you another year of kindergarten or another year of first grade, let's say we're going to give you 2 or 3 more months in the summer to try to pull you along to get to that 3rd grade mark that's so important. So maybe just some retention, just some analysis on the retention rates would be great. So thank you.
And I will say too, well, just for that, we do look heavily at it as well. The assistant superintendents look at that. We start looking at that even in February, March. I know they have conversations with schools, because that is also a way sometimes to identify if we see a grade level that's, proposing a lot of retentions. One of the things we also are going down is looking at that grade level to see, that's way outside the norm, so let's make sure that's not a teacher issue versus as a student issue. I mean, so I feel like, and particularly with what we do with the kids in the summer reading camp with the portfolios, we spend days looking at portfolios, reading portfolios for students. So we weigh that decision very heavily, that we are impacting possibly a child's life when we retain or not retain.
Right, great. Thank you.
We have 4 more speakers, so without objection, we'll extend for another 20 minutes. Mr. Meek.
Thank you. I just want to begin saying I believe, just like Lisa does, that it hurts them more to retain them in the lower grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So if you can't do that, don't do that. But that wasn't the reason I raised my hand. I had a question on the 96 hours that the state requires the students to have during the summer. Do they pay for that? Do they get reimbursed for this?
The state would pay for the kids they've identified of that, what was it, 331, Dr.
Yes.
McDavid? So that would pay for the 331, the summer reading camp. They pay based on the kids they identify.
So the 307,
I think it was 330.
we would pay for that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if it was 923, if all of them showed up, we would still have to pay for that.
Anything above the 330, basically, we pay for.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that we are not, or the state does not require the students to attend. Can the board require that they attend?
I mean, that would be outside of my purview of, I guess that would be Dr. Royster or Mr. Webb to weigh in on that one.
Okay. I'm just wondering that if we put a requirement on it, because I think those kids could really benefit from this, and some of them just may not want to attend, or it may be inconvenient for them, but that's something that maybe we could look at. Thank you.
I'm not aware of any statute that inhibits your ability to pass a policy regarding the promotion or retention of students. Mr. Webb?
I would have to review it and study a little bit. There is a statute that details and outlines what the school year is, specifically the number of days, and so I would need to look at that statute as it pertains to the board authority.
Most of those I've read said as they say at least that many days. They don't.
Yeah, I would just have to review it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Dr. Bala-Connor?
Yes, I wanted to ask if we have a waiting list for 4K at this time, given that you said we're still following the practice of only serving those who meet the requirements of having lots of limitations when they arrive at 4K. So are there any on the waiting list at this time?
I'd have to ask Dr. Andrews. There was not, every year up until this year, there has not been kids on the waiting list.
So all those who we say are really
Needed.
risk.
At risk.
are attending.
Yes, as last year when she and I had that conversation, all the at-risk, we actually were able to serve some of the kids that were, all the kids we'd want to serve at-risk, and then some that would fall into that, still at-risk, but not severe, not our cutoff or not our criteria, in other words. So all of our criteria of at-risk kids have been served up until this year.
Okay.
And I'm sure she usually would tell me if that was not the case.
Okay, the other thing, you mentioned that in response to Mr. Suddath's questions, that the teachers are being given professional development to teach them how to work with comprehension of reading. But do we still have teachers, for example, in 4th grade and 5th grade, required
Yes.
to learn how to teach reading for those who are still going to arrive unprepared?
Yes, so
Okay.
the comprehension was secondary.
Okay.
Yeah, not, the elementary still required for the basics.
That's fine. And then it occurred to me that, I don't know if it might be something the advocacy committee would be interested in, but why wouldn't we advocate to the state that they should provide funding for those students who are English language limited in the same way they would anyone else? And maybe to know how many of these students in 3rd grade who we're giving an exemption to have been limited in their English speaking proficiency from kindergarten, 1st, 2nd. It depends on what progress they're making each
Correct.
year. But it's almost as if when you talk about it by definition, these kids are just arriving and they can't really speak English. Well, if they arrived a long time ago and they're still not speaking English, that's a different problem for us to address as a district. But if they literally aren't speaking English because they are English as a second language, it seems to me that the state should fund those students because they are limited in the same ways that the other students they are paying for are limited. They cannot function at the proper grade level, and that's the purpose of it. So I don't know if that's something the district could try to work on, or the board.
I'll make sure I understand it correctly. But if they were failing to function at that level, they would fall within that category, so they would be funded.
Yeah, they're in the 331.
If they're inside that 331.
They are funded.
We're not getting anything extra for them, but they would be funded within the 331 because they qualify.
Oh, I thought that they were only funding those that we said were required
Oh, no.
to take it.
That would only have been 54 kids. No, they
Okay.
only do it on not
They
met
fall
one.
within that,
Not met
I'll
one.
make sure he's right there, the not met one category. If they
Okay.
fell there, we would receive funding for them.
Okay.
We don't receive
I misunderstood.
any state funding. I don't believe Robin's on vacation this week, but I don't believe we receive any state funding for ELL. And all the funding we receive for ELL is from the federal level, and it is highly restricted, and we can't hire the first teacher to work with the student out of federal funds for ELL. We can only hire materials, we can provide training, and we can pay for some amount of the person or persons who conduct the training or coordinate it at the district level, but we cannot use any of those federal funds to hire teachers for that purpose. In fact, you may recall several years ago, we brought forward a recommendation that you all approved, and we hired a significantly increased number of ELL teachers in order to reduce our pupil-teacher caseload, really more so than a ratio because of the way it works, the caseload there to a much more reasonable number.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valaconnor. Ms. Leventis-Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleagues on retaining students. I do agree at the young age. However, I also do not want to set them up for failure if they're not ready to go to the next level. But not having taught in elementary for many years, I would like to ask our assistant superintendents in the elementary area. They were principals. I would like their opinion on what their perspective is about a student not ready to go to the next level, but understanding that that's setting them back another year. But what is the benefit? What are the pros and cons? And in their years of experience, what did they see as a successful ending? If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. McCoy.
Yeah.
Good morning. Great to see y'all today. Welcome back. It's a great question. I always think and reflect back on those decisions that I made with my staff, that those are some of the most difficult decisions that we make. We realize that we're not only making a decision for a child for that year, but it can impact their whole life. To me, it was always a last resort. It's not the first strategy that we come to. Many times we have done lots of other interventions or strategies, specifically RTI or intervention for students to provide them additional reading skills. They may have access to before or after school programs, structures during the school day to provide additional support through kindergarten assistants, other staff and personnel in the building. I agree with Dr. Royster. Our practice has been, as much as possible, to retain in kindergarten and first grade if that needs to be done. And we have seen some good results with that being done on a limited basis. Again, that's not our go-to strategy that we do automatically if a child is not being successful. And two, we're having these conversations all throughout the year. We don't even wait to January, February to see if children are off track. We try to be very forward-thinking in the way that we work with our teachers in identifying students who are not being successful throughout the school year. I don't know if you have something you want to add.
So I agree with everything that has been said. As a practicing principal, retention was always used as a last resort. We prefer to retain students in kindergarten and first grade. We look at their performance throughout the school year, specifically their knowledge of letters in kindergarten, letter sounds, their ability to recognize words. And we meet with the parents on a consistent basis to make sure that we have a retention plan or a plan in place. So for those students that are retained, we do have a plan in place to do something different than what we did the year before, because we don't want to retain students and then we do the exact same thing that we did the year before. So we do have a process in place to review all of the data to make sure that we have a working relationship with the teacher as well as with the parents to ensure that the student is successful. But our goal is to obviously make sure that all students are successful, but we prefer to do it in kindergarten or first grade.
And with that being said, if a child is retained, are they given more opportunities, and are they being worked with that following year? Just because they were retained, do you just keep them in a class and let them do the same-o, same-o? Or are you giving them extra assistance in order for them to build their skills and their comprehension and so forth? Or are they just given back in kindergarten, back in first grade, and they'll do the same, they just have another year at it?
No, so we do provide extra assistance, whether that's through the RTI intervention program, the use of mentors, extra support from the classroom teacher, additional focus on the recognition of letter sounds, letters, words, sight words. There's a plan that we have to fill out. All principals do have to fill out a retention plan that outlines specifically what they're going to do differently with each child to ensure their success.
Okay. And the only reason I ask this is I do have a friend that did keep their child back, and I think it, from their perspective, was very helpful. but I just want to make sure that we're doing it throughout the district, and that we aren't just letting these children stay back and then just start another year the same. So thank you very much. I just wanted a professional perspective. Y'all have been there, done it, and I want to make sure that we continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levins, as well as Mr. Meek. I'll come back.
How do you spell SAMO? SAMO.
The same thing as stupidness.
SAMO. Okay. Thank you.
It's going to be in the dictionary.
Do you have an idea what the average cost per student is on the summer camp?
Dr. McDavid, do you have you want per child?
Per child, yeah.
I can get that after all of our expenditures are done to include some of the additional enrichment activities for the grant. We do, when we do our budget expenditures for all of summer reading camp, we'll divide that by the number of attendees and get you a per student cost.
What would be your guess?
I could not even venture.
Because I'm going to forget the question. I'll ask you again.
I'm writing it down.
We'll answer it whether
She'll
you
send it
remember
to
that or not.
Okay, I just thought it was a good idea to have in case we were to look at requiring more students to attend, what kind of cost we'd be looking at. The second question, I guess, you commented earlier, I believe I heard that after the 4th of July holiday that you lost students, which is almost like any break you have. So is there any way to have the summer camp without the 4th of July or without a break in it?
So we played with that over the last 7 or 8 years when we've been doing summer camps. The challenge is, it is hard to get. Our challenge has been the consistency of teachers. It is hard if you do a camp solely in July after that 4th, you're going into that first week of August. It is very difficult to get teachers to work because they're already starting to gear up for their classrooms, and they're trying to take their last minute vacations that they haven't had all summer because of PD and summer academy. So we played with that, but it's just we would not find near the teachers we have if we ran it only in July.
Okay, and you have a 4-week course, right?
We have a what now?
4 weeks of classes?
Yes, for summer camp.
For summer camp?
Yes.
And if I understood correctly, but you only have 14 days?
Well, 14, the 2 of those days included field trips,
Okay.
which are allowed by the state.
As long as they're instructional.
As long as they're instructional, and our field trips are very instructional, and it still incorporates reading and writing. And that is one strategy we use that the state is actually modeled after. The state is also modeled to try to get kids to continue to come to summer camp. Because if you do same old school the way you used to do it during the school year, it's hard to get the kids to come.
When do you have the field trips, and where do you have the field trips?
So that was the ones on this list here that Dr. McDavid had right here.
We do not have them the first week of school because that is a challenge as we're getting our numbers to normalize. But we schedule them such that Children's Museum of the Upstate, they have those in weeks 2 or 3. And then the Roper Mountain Science Centers in weeks 2 or 3. We also have them to come on site, so it's not a day that students are out of the school building, but they have an enrichment period. So Roper Mountain Science Center does their 50-minute presentation. The students go in for their enrichment. They go back to the classroom. So we do those activities, but they are not even out of school for the whole day to do these.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Mr. Shamley.
Quick questions. Are there any studies that show the ultimate success rate of students who are retained, say in K4, 1, 2, or 3, versus students who are not retained and ultimately either have to be retained in later grades or fail the test in later grades? I'm just curious, are there any kind of studies that would compare those?
The only ones I would be aware of, I'm not aware of any research study that compares the kids that weren't retained and have followed through with. I'm not saying that doesn't exist out there. We can certainly have Dr. McCreary look, or one of our institutes look at that. But there's a lot of research out there about the benefits of retaining children in the early grades versus it's more traumatizing socially as you move up through the grade levels.
Yeah, that would be my thought. And I guess the next one is a little bit, you might say goofy, and it sounds a little bit like getting half a stroke if you get really, 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 really close to the pin on a golf course. But is there any idea, or has there been any experimentation or thoughts with respect to students who are retained, if they come back the second year are making superior progress of maybe then advancing them to the grade they should have been in or somewhere like that during the course of the year? I'm just curious if that's a possibility for a student.
Yeah, so it certainly is a possibility. It's rare that we do that. There are certainly, I've dealt with maybe a handful, maybe two or three. I always do that with the assistant superintendents. We weigh that very carefully because we certainly don't want to promote them and skip a grade and then they're falling back behind again and have to pull them back. So we use a lot of data around that before we make a decision. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time it is parent initiated. And then we will look at it from the parent perspective. Obviously the parent doesn't get to just say that, but they would initiate the conversation. We would look at the data. The principal and their team looks at the data and then they make a recommendation to us who would ultimately advise the principal.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Ms. Wells.
Oh, Mr. Chamberlain and I were tracking along the same thought. I was going to ask if we had a policy for acceleration through a grade that might offset, if you do fail to promote someone, could you accelerate them? And do we have kind of some specific guidelines? Because certainly you always have the parents who are great advocates for their students who are going to help them get ahead, but
absolutely,
back to the children that are at risk who may not be developmentally ready when they come into school, if you hold them back, the likelihood that they have an advocate for them that's going to say, hey, wait a minute, they just needed a little more time, now they're going gangbusters. So if we don't have a formal policy for how we evaluate whether or not a student should be accelerated, it'd be great for us to work toward that.
Yes, I don't know there's a policy on that. The kind of unwritten rule in the schools is certainly that anybody, teacher or parent or principal, can evaluate a child for acceleration. But as far as like a board policy with that, I'm not sure there's a board policy.
And I don't know that it has to be a board policy, but certainly an administrative practice and some guidelines for that so that people know it is an option. So people do think about, hey, I've got this student who's really excelling after we had held them back. Let's move them back up, get them back on track for where they need to be with their age peers, because the age peer thing becomes a lot more important when you get to middle school. When you hit those developmental milestones, you can be all over the place. And I guess the other part of that is maybe there wouldn't be so much stigma around being held back a grade if we were more fluid in allowing more students to accelerate through grades. So if your grade level is really about your academic performance and not about your age, so maybe there's something there, if we're thinking about pushing the envelope in innovation, maybe where we need to be pushing is, yes, we're going to hold kids back sometime if they aren't getting it, but we're also going to accelerate those kids who are academically ahead.
So one thing I remind too is that where we are a little bit more, have done more of that is in the middle school. If you remember with the STAR programs that are in the schools, that's where a lot of the interest lies. That would be rarely parent initiated. That is almost always school or staff initiated is where we catch them. Because again, in elementary school, you're dealing with so much of the fundamental stuff in elementary school that's critical for future success. I don't see as many kids. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we have promoted or skipped a grade. Now we've had many, many more requests that after evaluating them did not meet the criteria for moving into the next grade.
And then the only other thing is to expand the reach of what we're doing with our summer program. If there's a way to
we'll
tack
look
on
at
to.
that.
Now we have 2 food trucks that travel around and give kids food. So if we had a way to amplify the effect of the summer feeding, maybe it's a summer feeding and reading program that we do there. So just another idea.
Yeah, we'll certainly look at that.
Thank you,
Mr. Is it too late for me to ask one more question?
Dr. O'Connor.
Yes,
you have 65 seconds.
Okay. Do we have computer programs that we pay for that families are able to use at home to help them accelerate their students' reading in a manner that we have confidence in the quality?
So we have schools individually pay for, we give them, they have flex money, they have local money they can use to purchase the programs they need for their community and their school. So we don't purchase anything district-wide. But yes, most of those programs like Lexia, Read 180 is really those licenses are available. Reading A to Z, all of those programs are available to kids over the summer. IXL Math.
It's like in the K-3, reading is what I'm specifically
K-5, yeah.
asking about. So if you had a program that you really believed in and you were able to offer some incentive that if they met certain levels, and I can remember watching a video in here of a couple of math or science teachers at a school who had their homework done so that the kids could react to them at home. If we've got all this great teaching going, since we have all this great teaching going on in classrooms with expert teachers doing reading lessons, if some of those things could be captured and then given to those students who are behind to really have the extra lessons at home.
And that's a good point, Dr. Connor. We probably at the school level probably don't advertise that enough, particularly school by school level, what we can do. We're getting a little better at that, but that's a good idea as far as doing more advertisement of that on a school-based level. You're right.
Thank you. No, that was, sorry, wasn't quite as short as I meant.
Do you need a little longer?
Oh, no.
Okay. I believe that ends this section. Just as a thank you to the staff for the presentation. Just as a review, there are a couple of items that I think you guys are going to get to us specifically. I wrote down some information about the Bell program, some questions about board policies around advancement and retention, some questions about Title I, the number of Title I students in those programs, and the Facebook link so that the board can view the video. If there's nothing else, that concludes the instructional policy section. I'm so excited that everyone was so engaged. I think having a month off, we just came with a real desire to dig deep. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I appreciate you filling in for Ms. Bush. At this time, I will turn it over to Mrs. Glenda Morrison-Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Item 3.01, the revision of Board Policy EB, Buildings and Ground Maintenance and Tobacco-Free Policy. Dr. Royster, would you like to have anything to say before I turn it over to Mr. Webb?
Just briefly, because I believe Mr. Webb has an overall summary of all these policies, but almost all the changes that Mr. Webb is bringing to you as a recommendation today are compelled to ensure that our policy has in it things that are required by state law. Many of these things we're already doing. They were either in process or procedure, might have even been an administrative rule, but on occasion the state will pass a statute and says you have to have this in policy. So many of these are not new items. It's simply to bring us in line to ensure our policy aligns with the statutory requirements of the state. Mr. Webb?
Thank you. And just to piggyback on that, I would go even a step further and say a large majority, almost 99% of what I'm bringing you today regarding tobacco and alternative nicotine products, which we'll talk about here in a minute, we have in place. If you recall, we were one of the first school districts, maybe the first in the state, to tackle and to prohibit vaporizers and electronic cigarettes a couple of years ago. And so what has happened recently is the state passed a statute requiring school districts to have a policy as it pertains to students, to employees, visitors on campus, prohibiting tobacco products, and it defines tobacco products as well as alternative nicotine products, which includes vaporizers and electronic cigarettes, among other items. So there are 4 policies as it pertains to this topic, this state law, which again mirrors the most recent state law passed in May by the General Assembly, incorporates those definitions, those terms into our policies. But again, this is more form over substance. The substance we are already doing, as far as behavior code for students, as far as expectation and requirements for employees, prohibiting these devices and tobacco on a campus. It's all being done already. So this is, again, just matching up the state law with our board policy. All right, so the first policy I will bring to you today is board policy EB, and that is the policy that contained previously the prohibition of individuals having any tobacco product on campus. And the old definition that was once in policy, the term tobacco product includes electronic cigarettes and vaporizers. Well, based upon the state law, as you can see on the second page of that policy, it defines what a tobacco product is. So it gives a formal definition to that term, and it also gives a formal definition to the term alternative nicotine product, which means any vaping product that does the following in that definition. So it would include all vaporizers and all e-cigarettes. Then the policy, again, to conform with state law, talks about the communication and notice of this prohibition, and it goes on to talk about the enforcement of the prohibition to make sure that these items are not permitted on campus or at school-sponsored events. And it talks about discipline, whether it be for employees, which is also contained in another policy I will be talking about in a minute. For our students, it still remains a level 2 offense for students. And for visitors on campus, they can be asked to leave as well. So that policy EB is sort of the catch-all general overview policy for tobacco products and alternative nicotine products. Then there are 3 additional ones that deal with students and employees. But again, EB just conforms with state law, brings it in, more substance, more form over substance, I should say, and happy to answer any questions on policy EB.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Dr. Ball O'Connor?
Yes, would you remind me what the consequence is for level 2?
Yes, ma'am. And that is board policy JCDA, which I will talk about more in a minute. But a level 2 offense is termed to be a disruptive conduct, and the consequences under that would be a variety. I have a spectrum: in-school suspension, withdrawal of privileges to participate in extracurricular activities or other functions, removal of class, out-of-school suspension, referral to an outside agency, assignment to alternative school, expulsion, and restitution for property damage and things of that nature. Wow. So it could be suspension to possible expulsion.
Or a referral to the office?
Or a referral to the office.
Awesome.
Or an outside entity,
That's a big, broad level.
But again, I want to emphasize that nothing in the behavior code is being changed today in any of these draft revisions. I do want to reemphasize that.
So if somebody was vaping and then it was discovered that they had, when it says alternative nicotine product, what if it was marijuana?
That would be a different infraction. That would be a level 2 offense, but would not fall under the term tobacco or alternative nicotine product.
So we just don't address that as part of tobacco-free policy. That's somewhere else.
That's correct. It's in our behavior code, but it does not relate to tobacco or a vaping product.
I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is because so many more students are involved with marijuana through vaping, that it's gotten much more common as a use and a way to hide and so on. So I wonder if we need to mention it in both places or not,
Well,
given that it's more common.
If the administration of any school finds that a student has possession of marijuana, the use of marijuana, that would be the infraction, the underlying infraction. It would not be the possession of a vaping product necessarily. So that would be what they would be disciplined based upon.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Meeks?
Thank you. Dr. Ball O'Connor asked my question, so I'll make a motion to approve the revision of board policy EB.
Second.
Make your statement again, Mr. Meeks.
Make a motion to approve the revision of Board Policy EB.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
There's no discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now, any questions? Call for the question.
Thanks. So, Mr. Webb, the sentence in the policy, I'm going to read it. The use of any tobacco product or alternative nicotine product is also prohibited by persons attending a school-sponsored event when in the presence of students or school personnel or in an area where smoking or other tobacco use is otherwise prohibited by law. So that's an or, or an or. So you go on a field trip to Charleston with your third grader and you're a smoker. So you can't, even if there's an area in Charleston that's specifically assigned for smokers, if school personnel or students can see you, then you can't smoke. Is that right? That's the way this reads. It's a school-sponsored event.
And I would not say if you're visible. And again, this language mirrors the state law. So I believe that the only way we could enforce it as a policy would be if it's part of that school-sponsored event. So we're talking about someone who is participating as a chaperone, a student, somebody who is helping with the school-sponsored events or otherwise part of it. I do believe if it's a public place and is otherwise permitted and it's not within the realm of those students, it's possible that would still be permitted.
Okay, so you're saying a field trip isn't necessarily a school-sponsored event?
No. Let me be clear. A school-sponsored field trip is a school-sponsored event.
Right.
My point being is when we talk about ors, I think the first or really refers to a person such as a chaperone or an employee, obviously, or a student who is participating in that school-sponsored event, such as a field trip. Okay, so that's the first or. Then when we talk about the next one, where a location where it's otherwise prohibited by law, then that would be the next or, which would also encompass that prohibition. So we're talking about school enforcing and making sure that no one, as part of a school-sponsored event, off campus, because that's really what your hypothetical is utilizing a vaping product or alternative nicotine product or tobacco. Or if that location does not permit vaping or alternative nicotine products or tobacco, then that would also be prohibited.
Okay, so you didn't really answer my hypothetical though. So are we saying that a chaperone, if she is on a trip, they're touring downtown Charleston and there's a place that is designated for smokers, does this say if students or personnel can see you in that, what is presence? How do we define what presence is, I guess, is the point. I mean, are we that?
Without offering up a legal opinion, here's how we define it. If you sign up to go as a chaperone on a trip and you smoke, we'd need to say to you, if you want to smoke, you need to do it outside the presence of students in an area that's designated for that purpose. Now, as far as I know, 15 years, that's never come up. So now I'm sure we have people that go and chaperone trips that smoke. So it's not been a problem, so I wouldn't foresee it being any more of a problem with the alternative product than it has been with the actual tobacco product. So I think they've reasonably handled that, because again, you'll never be able to write a policy that would address all situations. At some point, the common sense and judgment of the administration, in that case, the school administration, would come into play. So I'm sure they have to address that.
Well, my secondary question was, is that specific to, you said it mirrors the law, the language in the law. Is that what the language in the law
Yes.
says? So all you're doing is
That's right.
picking up that language and putting it.
That's correct. And it doesn't, as Dr. Royster said, change our practices, our position regarding chaperones or individuals participating in school-sponsored events.
Okay. And then with regard to employees, if you have an employee, I mean, effectively, we can't have an employee that smokes or uses nicotine products that would be confined to a school site, right? Because if they need to smoke during the day, basically, our policy is.
They would have to absent themselves from our property in order to do so.
Right, yeah, okay.
Now, I would not say that doesn't happen, because I'm sure in practicality, it probably does happen.
Right. Yeah, and so then the follow-up is, we have tobacco cessation help
Yes.
for our employees, and so we have that option available.
That's
Okay.
correct. And I've included that in both policies, but we do have it in practice for both students and for our employees as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, Mr. Southern.
One question, Dr. Orster.
Yes, sir.
We talk about if it's an outdoor event on our district property, are we very strict in that regard? If I'm at a stadium and they've got some kind of event, and I see people that are either have a tobacco product in their mouth or either they're smoking one, are we looking to focus on that or put any kind of emphasis on that?
I mean, we're going to carry out the policies that we have. It's obviously more, it draws more attention if someone were smoking, because it's pretty obvious. If somebody's chewing tobacco, it's a lot less obvious. So if someone were to notice that, then they should address that with the person. But it's just not as obvious. So does that go on? It probably does, and people don't even know it's going on. If you think about the number of spectators, for example, at Greer High School on a Friday night watching a football game, there's some number of them that's got some smokeless tobacco that they are actively engaged in the use of, I'm sure. And that would be true across the district everywhere. But there's not someone up there looking for that. Again, if you light up a cigar or a cigarette or a pipe, it's going to be pretty noticeable. Somebody's going to see that. So yes, it's against our policy. Yes, we would address it when it comes to our attention. Is someone actually out there actively seeking that out? Probably not.
I would think at all halftime activities, there's people that go out and smoke. I've seen that at all schools. And
Yes, sir. Where they go off the property
premises.
or over on the right of way.
no, they're not going off the property. They're just going from the stands out to the concession stand.
That shouldn't happen. They should have to go outside the confines of our property.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Ball O'Connor.
That I'm not looking at the same language about the or, but I wanted to ask this question. Are we saying, I don't think we are saying, that we would try to control whether or not an adult chooses to smoke in a non-smoking area? Because they still could do that as long as they're not in the presence of a student or...
In a non-smoking area?
Yeah.
But what we are concerned about is when we're talking about presence with students.
Right, so we don't care if somebody goes off campus and they decide to smoke in a non-smoking area somewhere. We're not trying to control all that, just
That's right.
when they're in.
As long as there's proper supervision, students, other people are covering, then that's okay.
We got enough issues to worry about chasing them down the street.
Mrs. Goodwin Caldwell.
I was just looking at the policy, and I see what it was I was going to ask. So this does include smokeless tobacco, the chew.
Yes, ma'am.
That they chew. That's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion, have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? All right, policy motion has been carried and policy EB has been approved. We next have item 3.02, policy GBRL.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Again, this mirrors state law. There's nothing that's beyond state law on this, and really nothing beyond what our current practice is with regard to the prohibition of tobacco products and alternative nicotine products by employees. It does, in the last paragraph, emphasize that there's support assistance available for employees, succession programs that we can refer them to if they come to us and ask for assistance.